Hello, everyone. I am so sorry for our tardiness. We had a lot of issues with technical stuff. So we're here, we're late, but I think we have made it. I have William here, my co-host. Hi, William. All right, let's see who we have in here. Okay, people are trickling in. I'm so sorry that this is late. We were having a lot of computer issues. Of course, you know, you lead so many different webinars, and then there's one out of every 20 where suddenly things go wrong, even though they've been going right for a long time. So I very much apologize. I'm really happy you guys are here. We're going to be using the chat a lot today. So feel free to pop into the chat and let me know where you guys are located right now. Where are you guys all? You guys in Costa Mesa? Are you in Newport? Tell me a little bit about yourself. Pop it in the chat. UCI area. Okay. Hi, Michaela. I hope I'm pronouncing the name right. Hi. Thank you for letting us know. Awesome. Okay. So let me get started over here while you guys are writing that in the chat. And let me just share my screen with our lovely presentation that we're doing today so that you guys can all learn a lot about the SAT and the ACT. Very fascinating topic, I know. So thank you guys for being here on a Saturday. Let me just get the screen share started over here. I'm on a different computer than usual because my computer was not working today. So hopefully this all works as I would like it to work. William, maybe just give me a quick thumbs up that you can see my screen. Awesome. Is it full screen? Cool. Very good. Okay. All right. So what is the deal with the SAT and the ACT? That's the big question, right? Let me just also pull up the chat over here so that I can see if you guys are writing anything in there. And then William's going to be moderating the chat a bit for both of us. So you have his support as well. Here we go. Awesome. Okay, so let's get started. Okay, so we're going to start with, I'm actually going to skip this because you have all been sitting here and waiting for me. So I'm going to skip this. We might come to this a little bit later, but basically a little bit about me. I've been a tutor and test prep expert for a long time. I've been doing this for about over 15 years and specifically test prep for quite a while. I got into test prep because I just, I was tutoring and it was the next thing to do to have more students. And I was really not very excited about it. But I was pretty excited once I got started because I realized that these tests are different for everyone, right? I thought I would be teaching the same thing over and over again and that I would, become a little bit bored with everything. But that did not happen because every student is different. And to make the material really accessible to every single student, you have to change your teaching style, right? And so that's what really made me very passionate about, doing all of this. So I became an educational consultant as well, which means I help students apply to college. And I ended up founding Strive to Learn. So today you're seeing this presentation because of the wonderful team that supports me and everything that we do. So we do tutoring, test prep, college admissions consulting, which really means that we understand a lot about how these tests are working right now, right? With COVID, a lot has changed. I'm going to go over that today. I'm sure a lot of you have questions about the test optional movement and what this may mean. And so we're really going to kind of dive into that. All right, so let's take a look at what these tests even measure, right? Okay, so what do they measure? Does anyone know? Can anyone venture a guess in the chat for me? What do you think the SAT and ACT measure? Give me something, you guys. Let me know you're alive and listening. Let me know you guys are there. I'm looking over here because that's where I have my chat window. What do you guys think they measure? Okay, logic. That's a great one. Analysis. Got it. And what else, you guys? We have couple more attendees here. Comprehension skills and mathematical knowledge. Yes, Arjun. Madeline, your education level. And Dorothy Hickson, the test taking skills. Emily as well. Awesome. Very great. Okay. So this is really interesting. We have you guys are good. You guys are very good. We have logic, analysis, comprehension skills, mathematical knowledge, education level, testing, taking skills, and another one, test taking skills. Well, I think that you guys are pretty close to what it is. The tests say they measure college readiness, right? That wasn't any of your guys' answers, because you're right. They measure a lot of the things that you said. So I really want to kind of take a look at that. What do they measure? Is it college readiness? Is it test taking skills? Is it comprehension skills? What is it, right? So we're going to take a look at a sample student real quick. So this sample student, her name is Margot, and she got a total composite score of 1200, right, out of 1600 total possible on the SAT, which put her in the 74th percentile. In the math, her score was kind of low. Her score was higher on the reading and writing and language. It was a little low in the math, so she was in the 50th percentile. Not bad, right? 50th means average. She's right in the middle of everyone who has taken it. But she felt very much that her math score did not show, did not demonstrate her college readiness. She very much felt that she could have done much better, and that it didn't really show her mathematical knowledge either. So let's see what Margot ended up doing. What did she go on to do? So Margot ended up getting a dual degree in psychology. Oh, my feed is freezing. Okay, am I frozen for anyone else? Let me know if I'm frozen. William, do you know if it's all good? I just got a message. Okay, it's okay. Okay, great. Okay, good. It's on and off. Okay. I'm getting some other messages that it's okay. Maybe it has something to do with the internet on your end. I'm not sure. It looks okay. Okay. Thank you guys so much for chiming in. Thank you. Since I can't see myself, this is super helpful. Okay, so maybe it's the other person's connection. Okay, cool. Thank you. All right, so Margot ended up, okay, so, all right, so you guys can see the case study, right? Still sharing the correct screen? Okay, great. Thank you guys for the confirmation. I'm getting a couple mixed signals here, so. Okay, great. Thank you so much. So Margot ended up getting a dual bachelor's degree in psychology and ethnographic documentary. She ended up graduating summa cum laude with a 4.0 cumulative GPA. And then after that, she ended up going onto a master's degree in visual and media anthropology. So, if we think back at her score, she was in the 50th percentile for math, and then she goes into a degree that actually needs statistics. She did a lot of research, et cetera, right? And she did so successfully with a 4.0 cumulative GPA. So when the College Board or the ACT say that these tests measure college readiness, I would say, in Margot's case, maybe not quite. It said she was in the 74th percentile versus graduating summa cum laude. So what really is, what did she go on to do? Let's take a quick look. So adulting wise, Margot ended up going on to teach at Chapman University, and she also founded her own company. So at this point, you may know that was me. That was my middle name, is Margot. So I really, did not feel strong about my math at all. Yet I was able to go on and have a successful career. I really enjoyed college. I took all the opportunities I could have gotten. And looking back, I know that SAT score really wasn't representative of my college readiness, right? So you guys had such great answers, but the one that I think most stood out to me, and I can see that you guys all chatted only to panelists. So if you guys want other people to see kind of how you're chiming in, make sure to hit chat to all. But two of you said test taking skills. So I would say that is true. These tests measure how good are you at taking a timed, standardized test. They do try to measure comprehension skills, analysis, mathematical knowledge, some of the other answers that you guys gave, but they don't always successfully do so. there are a lot of struggles students can have when it comes to these tests, from test anxiety to struggling with timing to, being stronger at writing essays or open answer rather than multiple choice. So I really do think test taking is a skill on its own, and it's a skill you need for college, right? But does it really show how ready you are for college? Not all the time, right? Okay, so let's take a look at, as far as the college application goes, you're taking these tests to go to college, right? You're not just taking them because you're bored on a Saturday and you just can't wait to go and take a 3-hour test. You're taking them because, as we see here in this bubble, they are part of your college application, right? They are one of the many moving parts. So a lot of students get really stressed out because they feel like, oh man, my SAT score is stressing me out. But, I can tell you right now, they don't look at all of your scores. I'm sorry, I said that wrong. They don't look only at your score. They look at your GPA. They look at your extracurricular activities. And as far as your GPA, they also look at your grade trend and whether or not you have had a certain amount of rigor. Have you challenged yourself? Have you pursued an academic passion? You also write all of these college essays, right, to get in. And so they take a look at that too. Have you and are you able to eloquently give them a little window into your world? They look at your overall application, your demographics, all of that. They check whether you're showing passion, and they read your letters of recommendation. So there are a lot of different parts to a college application, and the SAT and the ACT is not, the massive thing that you need to worry about. And when we take a look at the GPA versus the SAT and ACT, there's actually a weighing. What do you guys think is weighed heavier? What is more important, the SAT, ACT, or the GPA? Give me some answers in the chat. What do you think the colleges weigh more important? I'm getting a couple answers here. They're all the same so far. Okay, I'm not saying it because I know you guys can't all see the chat because everyone's writing to panelists only, but so the GPA, right? Your GPA is more important than your test score. What does predict success then in college, right? If we really take a look at this, the GPA versus the test score, this is quite interesting. This was a study done with a very large sample size. I think, I don't want to misquote it. You can look it up. So we put it over here. You guys are going to get the slides after as well. They'll be emailed to you. Okay, so if we look at the college cumulative GPA and the high school GPA, you can see the high school GPA seems to be a pretty predictive factor, right? We can see here they kind of, as one increases, the other increases, and they come pretty close together. You can definitely draw a clear line through that cluster, which means it's a pretty strong correlation. When we look at this with the college cumulative GPA over here on the y-axis and the SAT score on the x-axis instead of your high school GPA, it becomes more of a diffuse cloud. It's harder to draw a clear line, right? Would the line go here? Would it go here? The cloud is very spread out, which means it is a weaker correlation than with the high school GPA. So I just wanted to throw this in because I think this is really interesting. And I think that a lot of students really stress themselves out a lot. And so I just want to kind of decrease that pressure here a little bit, that what you get on these tests is not necessarily a prediction of how you will do in college. So don't let these tests get you down. Like, work towards them, keep working at it. But don't be, afraid for your future because you're struggling with these tests. That's normal. Everyone struggles with these tests, right? Okay, so these are just some more data slides. You guys can look at that. So really, what do these tests measure? Do they measure college readiness? Nope, they do not. And you guys had some great answers for what they do measure, right? Now, one of the really important things though, is although they may not measure college readiness, as we said, they do measure how well you take a timed multiple choice test, right? And they do measure your math skills, your comprehension skills, etc. Not in a way that is accessible to everyone, but they do, do that. So it's really important to know that there is a silver lining to deciding to take one of these tests. If you really focus on preparing well to take the test, that really allows you to practice your college readiness skills. In college, you will be taking multiple choice tests. In college, you will have to really make sure that you are studying long-term for a goal. You have less guidance from your professors than you do in high school, right? In college, you're in class probably about 15 hours a week versus having to do work outside of that for the other 20 to 30 hours a week. In high school, that's flipped. You spend a lot more time in class and at school and less time doing homework compared to how it will be in college, right? And so in college, you will have to know how to think critically. You'll have to develop really good study habits. You'll have to know how to manage your time. You'll be preparing for a goal in the long term, right? As you're studying for an exam, as you're writing a bigger paper. You'll need your basic reading and math skills to be able to succeed, to place into the classes that you really want to take. Even if you're not going to be a math major, you still need, that basis. You'll be taking tests and things will get stressful, right? So all of these things are the same about college, and they're the same about how you prepare for the tests. And so I just want to point out that there is this silver lining that by preparing for one of these tests, you are really practicing everything that will really guide you once you are in college, because this isn't in class. This isn't a teacher telling you, here's this homework, go do it, right? You're really preparing for something on your own that is a goal very far out. So I know we're all here because COVID did a lot to these tests. So let's take a look at what actually has changed. So let's dive in here. Let's dig in. So these are the smaller changes that I'm going to talk about first before I really dive into the nitty gritty. So the SAT 1, which is the SAT reasoning test, that's the test everyone always talks about. Those are just kind of the formal names, but what everyone usually just calls the SAT. It dropped its essay. So it used to have an optional essay, and now it no longer has that anymore. So the SAT test dropped the optional essay. Now the ACT has not dropped the optional essay, but if I had a crystal ball, I think it would probably show me that they would drop it soon. Now, since the SAT and the ACT are seen as equivalent tests by the universities, no university prefers one or the other, right? That's really, really important. Because of that, since the SAT is no longer requiring the essay, or no longer offering the essay, the colleges can't require the essay. Some colleges used to require this. Now they can't. So even if you take the ACT, you really don't have to worry about the essay anymore. It's still a great experience to have taken it. I mean, great, right? I think it's a great way to practice your essay writing skills. And it does not factor into your overall score. So you can still take it without it doing much to your score if you want the experience, but it is not required by any college because the SAT did drop it. Also, the SAT subject tests have been completely dropped. This happened in January 2021. So there are no more SAT subject tests. They just don't exist anymore. Now let's talk about the ACT changes. So the ACT prior to the pandemic was going to offer section retesting, which means that after you've taken a full length test at the next test date, you could take only one section. It would replace the section. If you got it higher, it would replace the section on the first test. Now they decided not to do that because there was such a limitation on test centers, right? And so they wanted to keep more seats open for students who still needed to take the full test. Also, they started offering a super score report, which is really important to note that super scoring is when a college takes into consideration your highest scores, your highest section scores across several test dates. So they will create a new so-called super score that takes, for example, if your math was the highest on the first one, but your science and reading were the highest on the second one, it'll combine these. And then let's say the English was the highest on the fourth one, it'll combine these into one super score. But when your score report gets sent out, it still does show all of the other scores you had. So it doesn't X them out or delete them or anything like that. So that's just something good to know about the score report. It's hard to say, score report. Say that 3 times quickly. So it's just really, really good to know that they will still see all of your scores, but it really shows students, what is my super score? Because that was, it's kind of hard to calculate that, especially if you're not quite aware of what a super score is or how colleges take a look at that. So it offers a lot more transparency for students to understand their scoring. Okay, so let's talk about what the real big change was, right? A lot of students were not able to test. The pandemic closed a lot of test centers. A lot of tests were canceled, right? Both SAT and ACT. In California, it was actually one of the worst in the nation. Only 16% of site availability happened compared to the previous year. So that's, you really have to let that sink in. Those are seniors and juniors who, really only had 16% of seats available to them. So it was a very stressful time, right? I mean, it still is, and it was, but I'm curious, can you guys write into the chat over here? Are you a student or a parent? I'd love to see that. And then also, whether you're a student or the parent of a student, what year are you or your student in? Are you junior? Are you senior? Are you sophomore? Are you really early in this presentation? Are you freshman? Give me a little idea of kind of who you guys are. Okay, so we have a 10th grader here. Great. Okay, we have a senior. All right, rising senior. Wonderful. A sophomore, a junior. Wow, we have a really good mix here. Great. Okay, so, and another senior. Wonderful. Okay, this is really great for me to know. So you guys who are rising seniors, you may not have taken the test yet, right? A lot of students like to take these tests in their junior year, right? Get them out of the way, and then they can focus on their college applications. I know that some juniors were able to test in the second half of junior year. So, right, in the last half year, but a lot of students kind of left it, right? So the real question is, when can I test, when should I test, and should I test? So let's come to this. This is how the colleges responded to that question, right? What were they going to do if they still required that you have to have a test score to be able to apply? Then that would mean that the 84% of students who weren't able to test wouldn't have been able to apply to college, right? So these are the responses that the college admissions offices gave. They either went test optional, or they went test blind, which is now often called test free. So test blind and test free is kind of the same thing. Test optional is separate. I think only the Florida State schools still required it. So pretty much every college, 3,000 universities, right? Around 3,000 universities, how many we have here in the US, went test optional or test blind. So let's talk about test blind or test free first. Let's talk a little bit about what this means. This is the one that is not as common, but this is also the one that the UCs went to. So this is really important for us in California here, right? So test blind or test free means that your SAT score will not be considered as part of your college application at all. So it will not be considered. That means you can mail it to them, you can email it to them, you can, nail it to their door. They will not consider it as part of your college application. So as you build your college list, especially for the rising seniors, if you check and you're applying to only test blind institutions, then there's no need for you to take the SAT or the ACT. Yeah. That's only if they are test blind or test free. So really make sure to take a look at that. Now the UCs are permanently test free. The UCs have completely gotten rid of SAT, ACT scoring as part of their application. They will not consider it. They used to have a 14-factor review process. One of those 14 factors was the SAT or ACT score. Now it's a 13-factor review process, right? So they've really changed how they look at applications when it comes to this test score. Okay, so I have someone who's asking what test blind is. Okay, William, thank you for writing that in there. Okay, so also please write any questions you have into the chat. William will be answering those behind the scenes, and then I'll also go through and answer more, once we have our Q&A at the end. So please write in anything that you want in the chat, and we'll make sure that all your questions are answered. So let's talk about test optional. Test optional is the one that you hear a lot more about. You have a lot more universities who went test optional rather than test blind. So test optional means you have an option, right? And when you have options, you have different paths. So we have our path 1 and our path 2 here from our little mindful college-bound student. And path 1 is that you choose to apply with your SAT or ACT score. And when you do that, then they factor it completely into your application. So they will look at your score, and they will look at all the other moving parts of your application that we talked about earlier. And your score is one of the many moving parts, and it can have an impact on your application. Path 2 is you choose the option to apply without an SAT or ACT score. So this might be if you were unable to test. It might be a great option if you feel like your test score just isn't what you want it to be. So we're going to really dive into path 2 here in just a moment. But those are your options. So test optional doesn't mean I don't need the test. It means I need to make a decision on whether or not I would like to take the test. And once I've taken it, whether or not I would like to submit my score. So the idea behind this is that your standardized test scores become additive only. And that's really what I want to look at this. What I want to look at here. They become additive only. If you feel like it will add to your application, you apply with it. If you feel like it'll detract, you leave it out. And if you choose to apply without your SAT or ACT score here, like our path 2, there's absolutely no disadvantage to not submitting your scores for admission purposes. And you see how I underlined admission purposes here, right? So it will not have a negative impact on your application if you don't submit your score. But something that can happen is that it could possibly disadvantage you a little bit when it comes to scholarships, if you want to attend an honors college within the university, or if you're applying to a very specific accelerated degree option, because some of those still require test scores. So there's a lot that you need to know about test optional schools. You really need to do your research well, and you need to know what you are applying for, because sometimes a test optional school that allows you to apply without a test score, if you choose to do so, will still have a test requirement for very few programs. So just really make sure to talk to those admissions reps. Call the university that you're interested in, chat with them, ask them, right? They're more than happy to really help you build a great college application. So just really make sure that you reach out to them. Now, test optional is not a new thing. A lot of people think that test optional came about because of the pandemic, but actually the first university to go test optional was Bowdoin College in 1969. That was a long time ago, right? We're in 2021 now. 1969, Bowdoin College, pretty selective and competitive college, was the first to go test optional. And prior to the pandemic, by March 2020, right? This is exactly prior to the pandemic. Over 1,000 universities in the US were already test optional. So again, test optional is not new. It is not something that was invented because of the pandemic. And I think that's really important, because a lot of people, I think, are really kind of, insecure and scared and stressed out by this policy. What should I submit them? Should I not, right? Will they penalize me for not applying with one? But it's not new. A lot of universities have used it. A lot of universities have tried this out. It is a model that works, and it works well. And, really, really important is that it's not new, I guess. I know I just said that like 5 times, but I just really want you to take that away from this. So before the pandemic, already 25% of the top 250 national universities were test optional. University of Chicago has a very low acceptance rate, 6 or 7%, I believe. And they were test optional, right? And more than 50%, so more than half of the top 100 national liberal arts colleges were also already test optional. So again, the test optional movement basically just exploded a bit with the pandemic, but it wasn't created, it wasn't synthesized because of the pandemic. And I think that's just really important. So really seeing the pandemic more as a catalyst for the test optional movement. And a lot of universities decided not to just go test optional forever, but to try it out for 1 or 2 years. And that's why it's so important for me to know, are you a junior, sophomore, senior, right? Which year are you going into? So since we have some seniors here, a lot of the universities decided to go test optional now for 2 years. So they've renewed it for 2 years because the pandemic isn't over yet. Test centers are still closed sometimes, right? And we don't really know what's going to happen. So you guys, especially my rising seniors who are listening to me here, you guys really need to make sure that you go in and you really check, is it test optional? And if so, then you can decide, should you take the test or not? And we're going to talk about how to decide that. It's kind of a trial run approach. Some universities decided to go test optional for forever. So they're like, nope, we're definitely doing it. Like the UCs, for example, are going test free, right? Permanently. So really take a look at all of that. And I have a great link here that's going to be linked in your slideshow right here. There's a whole database that's constantly updated. It's updated like every day or every 2 days with test optional schools. And this is really important. Over 1,500 universities are test optional or test blind by now for the 2022 applicants, right? 2022 applicants, those are our rising seniors in here. So it's not all of them, right? It's less than for the 2021 applicants. So less than for the for your friends who just graduated in June or May. So really take a look at this. Now, if you are a sophomore, a rising sophomore, a rising junior, then you don't know yet if the universities that you are looking at applying will be test optional or not. Again, I think test optional is going to stick and stay with a lot of these universities, but there are about 3,000 universities or 2,800 universities in the US, right? So 65% of those are for 2022 test optional, test blind. I am assuming that will be lower for 2023 or 2024 applicants, but it's still going to be higher than prior to the pandemic. So really take a look at Fair Test. Yeah? It's a nonprofit organization. We did have a question come in. So let me take a quick look at this. Okay, great. I'm going to come to that question, Dorothy, in a little bit. Yeah, that's definitely something we'll go over. So I'm not going to read out loud right now because I'm going to derail everything, but it is coming up. I will answer your question. Okay, so like I said, for the 2023 applicants or 2024 applicants, we don't know yet. A lot will return to test required and some will remain test optional or test free. So you really need to do your research, right? Now you might think, why are universities doing this? I mean, that's great for students, right? My score is additive only. I can apply with it if it's strong. And if I don't think that it's strong, I don't need to submit it. That's great. But why are universities doing it? Well, it actually is really great for universities. It really makes them look like they become more selective. And there are two main factors that kind of lead to that happening. So for one, they end up getting a lower acceptance rate. More students end up applying because more students, the test has been a barrier to students applying in the past, right? I've had students who really wanted to go to UCLA and I said, yeah, go ahead and apply. But they struggled so much with the standardized test that they ended up applying to only test optional universities or decided to go the transfer route, which is a lot easier if you want to get into a UC, especially a highly selective UC like UCLA. And so they didn't even apply as freshmen applicants, right? So now that the test has been dropped, a lot more students with wonderful GPAs and extracurricular records and all of that, they're applying. So we get lower acceptance rates. More people are applying, the same number of people are getting in, which lowers the overall acceptance rate. And that makes the school look more selective. Now, also the students, for example, at a test optional university who choose to submit their scores, they're probably pretty proud of their scores, right? They're probably pretty excited about their score, and that's why they're choosing to submit it. And that increases the average SAT or ACT scores of the incoming class. And so both of those together, lower acceptance rate and an increase in the average SAT and ACT scores, allows those universities to rank higher in national rankings. So a university, when you look at their statistics, if they're test optional, the year that you're looking at their statistics, just know that you're only looking at those SAT and ACT scores of the students who decided to submit them, right? So it really pushes it up quite a few points, because the students who are unsure about their score, they're just not going to submit it, right? So those average really start changing. So let's take a look at a few examples from the most recent application season. So we had a lot more applications, right? At Emory, for example, we had an 18% increase in applications. UCLA, very important. The UCs, I'm sure you heard, there's a 28% increase in applications. 28%, right? That is a lot. Those are a lot of students that are also sending in their applications. At Harvard, you had a 20% increase. So you may wonder who's applying. The students applying are, for example, the one I just said, but in general, students from underrepresented backgrounds. So going test optional really helped level that playing field and remove the barriers to college access that some students had. It's scary though, right? Now you have more students applying, so you have more to compete with. So we really need to understand, okay, so when it comes to test scores, what can I actually do about this, right? So a quick refresher, what do the SAT and ACT measure? Write it in the chat. What do you guys think the SAT and ACT measure? Just real quick. I got one, I got another one. So far, excellent answers. Yep, test taking skills, that's right. They do, and especially timed tests, right? Timed multiple choice, which is very, very important, because you can test things in a lot of different ways. That doesn't mean that you're going to get the same score always, even though you're testing the same thing, if you change how you're testing it, right? So let's take a look at what's actually on these tests. How are they different? How are they the same? So we're going to compare the ACT and the SAT, because you will probably be asking yourself, which one should I take and how do I decide, right? Okay, so they both have 4 sections, but the ACT has a science section. The SAT does not. Instead, the SAT has 2 math sections, which half of you, please don't drop out this call. The SAT has 2 math sections. I know that's probably really scary. Now, does that mean that you should take the ACT if you're scared of math, or should you take the SAT if you're scared of science? It's not that simple, right? So let's go look through this a little more. They're both approximately the same time. It's about 3 hours for both, give or take 5 minutes. The ACT has that optional essay. Like I said, no colleges will require that anymore, since the SAT no longer offers the essay option. The ACT has a lot faster pacing. So the ACT, you have about 49 seconds per question. The SAT, you have more time. You have 1 minute and 10 seconds per question. And that's overall. And it changes. Sometimes it's more, sometimes it's less, depending on which section you're looking at. The ACT is scored out of a total of 36 points. The SAT is out of a total of 1,600 points. I know, what were they doing, right? Do they really want to confuse everyone? How do you compare a 36 to a 1,600, right? We will go into that as well. Now, this 36 on the ACT is the average of all the 4 sections. So each section is out of 36, and then you add them all up, divide by 4, and you get your overarching composite score. The SAT has 2 main scores. One is the writing and language combined with the reading section. So those are 2 sections out of 800. And then the other one are the 2 math sections combined out of 800. So I really want you to think about that. On the ACT, it's an average of your 4 sections. One of those 4 sections is math. It's the second section. So math is a 1/4 of your score, right? On the SAT, math is half of your score, right? Because the 2 math sections get added up, put together into 1 out of 800. So if you do really struggle with math, the ACT might be the better choice. There are a lot of other factors though, right? How do you deal with timing? You saw the pacing is really different. The ACT is much faster paced. So if you really struggle with timing, then you might like the SAT better, even though math is weighted more heavily. But you have more time per math question, right? And per other question as well. So that's a really big one. I get a lot of students coming in saying, I'm going to take the ACT because I'm good at math and science. And I say, did you know that half your score on the SAT is actually math versus on the ACT is only a quarter of your score? I'm like, wow, I didn't know that. So there's a lot that goes into choosing these tests. The ACT approach overall feels a little more straightforward. My students are often say it feels a little more like what you might be asked at school, how your teacher at school might be really kind of structuring a test. Well, the SAT has a little bit more logic, and I did have someone in the chat say earlier, these tests measure logic. The ACT a little less, the SAT a little more, but neither one of them measure it that much because it's not a skill that's taught that much in high school. So like the LSAT, for example, measures logic much more, which is, you know, a completely different test that nobody in here needs to worry about yet. Let's take a look at each section, yeah? So on the ACT, we have our English section. On the SAT, we have our writing and language section. They're comparable. They're very similar. If you open a page to that section in both tests, in either test, it looks pretty much the same. The ACT focuses a little heavier on grammar and usage and punctuation. The SAT a little more on rhetoric, but overall, they both focus on grammar and usage, punctuation, structure, and rhetoric. The ACT is slightly less complex in the passages. The SAT has some data graphs included, some tables, maybe a pie chart, things like that. And they do have questions about that. So like we saw, the SAT does not have a science section. So the science instead, it's just kind of morphed into some of the other sections by adding a few charts and tables every once in a while on the writing and language section, the reading section, or the math section. On the SAT, you have 33% more time per question on the writing and language section. So you have 44 questions and 35 minutes. Well, on the ACT, it's really quite fast, 75 questions in only 45 minutes, right? I know this is a lot of information. So we will be sending you this overview as well as a little SAT and ACT survival guide that really walks you through everything that I'm talking about today, because I'm trying to throw everything at you and see what sticks. But I do know this is a lot, especially if you're hearing it for the first time. Okay, let's take a look at the math. So both tests focus on pre-algebra through basic trigonometry. The ACT focuses a little more on geometry and the SAT more on algebra. So again, it's not as simple as I'm good at math, I'm bad at math, or anything like that. You really want to think about which math classes resonated with you. For me personally, I was not great at math, and I really struggled with it, as you saw in my example, but I really loved geometry. I honestly, back then, didn't really know much about the differences between the tests. So I just took the SAT. But, you know, now if I were taking it, maybe the ACT would be better for me, right? If I were still my high school self. The ACT is broader when it comes to the range of topics, and the SAT is deeper on fewer concepts. Also on the ACT, you do not get any formulas, but on the SAT, you get your basic geometry formulas. So, you know, what is the volume of a cylinder, the area of a triangle, things like that. On the SAT, again, you have a lot more time per question, 58 questions in 80 minutes. On the ACT, it's 60 questions in 60 minutes, so a minute per question. The ACT allows you to use your calculator on all of the different questions on the math section. The SAT, since it has the two sections, one is a shorter section, one is a shorter math section, less questions, and that one you are not allowed to use your calculator on. The longer math section with more questions, you are allowed to use your calculator on. So don't stress out too much about that. You shouldn't need your calculator for the no calculator section on the SAT. They're not going to ask you this crazy question where you have to do a bunch of long division or anything like that. It should definitely be solvable without having a calculator. So they're not trying to trick you or anything like that. Now on the ACT, all questions are multiple choice. On the SAT, you do have 13 open answer questions only on the math. So only the math has some grid in questions where you just have to actually enter the number that you've calculated rather than choosing it from a multiple choice section. All right, let's come to the reading portion. So both of them have a reading section. It's called reading on both of them. The ACT has 4 passages with 10 questions each, while the SAT has 5 passages with 10 or 11 questions each. So you can see the SAT has more questions on the reading, right? 52 questions, but 65 minutes, while the ACT has 40 questions, that's 12 less, but only 35 minutes. So less than a minute per question on that one, more than a minute per question on the SAT. They both focus on questions that cover reading comprehension, vocabulary, author's role, textual evidence, but the SAT focuses a bit more on the vocabulary and the ACT more on the reading comprehension. Yeah. And like I said, the time constraint can be quite harrowing, especially on the reading section when it comes to the ACT. The science section, like I said, the SAT does not have a science section. Instead, there are 21 questions with graphs and data in other spaces, like on the reading section or the writing and language or math section. The ACT has its whole own section for that. It's 40 questions in 35 minutes. It really mimics the reading section, just that you are reading scientific articles. There are a lot of graphs and data, but there's no specific science knowledge required to do well on the ACT science. You should probably know the boiling and freezing point of water and the fact that, how magnetic poles attract each other or not. And that's about it. That's it. There's really no prior science knowledge needed. It's much more of an open answer or an open book test on the science is what it really feels like, a reading test. So students are often very surprised. So if they really struggle with reading but love math and science, the ACT isn't always right for them if they really have that reading struggle under the time constraint, because the science section is very fast paced and you need to be very detail oriented. Other students thrive on it. They love it and they do really well, right? So again, what you're hearing is I'm saying you can't really decide by just knowing the differences between the tests, right? There's really more to it than that. Okay, so there's one more thing that might change how you feel about the two, and that's that the SAT, more colleges super score the SAT. So combining your highest section scores from separate sittings. So that's just a little caveat. If you don't know how to choose and you feel like you could take either one, the SAT might be better if you have colleges that super score it, but not the ACT. So let's really talk about how do I decide which test to take? Now that I know about all the differences and I'm realizing, oh man, this is a lot more multifaceted than I thought it would be, right? There is a lot to this. How do I decide? So we made a little overview here. There are a couple different factors that go into it. So if you struggle with timing, the SAT might be the better option, right? If you feel like, yeah, I'm really good at quickly deciphering tables and graphs, the ACT might be better because of that science section. If you're really strong at math and want that to really lift your score, the SAT might be better because 50% of your score is math. If you feel like you really need straightforward questions that are similar to what you see in school, ACT might be better. If you rely heavily on your calculator and love geometry, ACT could be a better fit. But if you really are really good at algebra, the SAT might be the better fit. So you can see, this is a long list, right? So it's really just not that simple. So the best way to decide is to take a full-length practice test of each. And we're actually offering some more practice tests with the library. One SAT and one SAT and one ACT, which you can sign up for as well. And we'll have those links in an email to you after this. So that's really the best way. It's to take the full length test and to not only take one, but to take one of each. So a lot of students are like, oh man, I have to take one of each. I say yes. It's 3 hours. So, carve out some time. You're on summer break, probably, hopefully right now. Carve out some time to take one of each. We're including a link here to a free downloadable or proctored test. But like I said, we're also offering one through the library this week, next week. Also, once you've taken them, you want to compare the two tests. so that then you can choose one. And you heard me earlier, right? We have a score out of 36 and we have a score out of 1600. Whew. So how do I compare those, right? And that's why I put this little picture down here of the SAT, ACT score comparison charts. So we linked that in here. When you click on this, you'll get to the official score comparison charts. And then once you've decided which test to take, so which one are you scoring higher on, which one do you hate less, which one do you feel like you have more potential for growth on, then you pick your test date and set a study schedule for yourself. So one of the things that we do to really help students decide all of this is we offer a free consultation where we sit down, and that's offered to all of you and anyone really, when we sit down and we go over how you did on the test. So we go through your score report when we really kind of help you pick that test date and set a study schedule. This is something that we do for all students. They don't have to be our students. It can be someone just working independently, because we want to really support any youth in our community to help them figure out which one is the best one. This can be really stressful, you know, taking this test. And so don't waste your time trying to prepare for both, but really focus on the one that will showcase your strengths more, that won't show your weaknesses as much, and the one that you really, you know, like I said, hate less, I guess, is the best thing to say for most students. So take advantage of that, you know, really schedule a consultation, go through all of that. We'll be reaching out to you after you take the free proctor test, if you decide to take one. And we'd love to help you understand your scores. It's just, there's so many different things going on. And then you can see how you want to study for it once you have your test date. Okay, so the big question is, how do I decide whether I want to test, right? Now that I know how to choose and all of that, you know, how do I decide whether I want to test? So I guess my biggest piece of advice is that if you know for sure that you don't need it for your college applications, you don't have to take it. But my animations are not working very well. You can save yourself that stress, right? And you can boost other aspects of your college application. But I also don't want you to miss out on an opportunity. And I don't want you to kind of close off your way forward. So we talked about this before today, right? That these tests are additive. So if you realize it would be nice to do something that can really help my college application, go take it. You know, it's a really great idea to take it. But if you know that you're applying, for example, only to UCs, then you don't need to take it, right? They're not going to look at it. I've never had a student who, well, I'm sorry, never say never, right? I have had one student only over the last decade who applied to only UCs. And applying to only UCs, right? It's tricky because they have so many applicants. If you know that's what you're doing, then you don't have to take this test. But if you think you might be applying to a university that's test optional, you may want to take it. And so we created another little checklist that can really help you to decide to test or not. So if you really struggle with standardized testing and you have severe test anxiety, and this test is just really decreasing your confidence, decreasing your mental health, your well-being, you know, you may not want to take the test. If you are applying, however, to a test required university or program, so an honors college or a specific scholarship you're trying to get, then you should probably take the test. You can always decide then to submit it, right? If, like I said, if you're applying to only UCs, maybe don't take the test. If you believe that your GPA reflects your abilities, it doesn't reflect your abilities, but you're a good test taker, then take the test. This is something that you can still change. You can still affect your application positively by taking this test. And then if you do well, you can submit it. If you want, therefore, another shot at improving your overall application, I really encourage you to take it. And if you have time to study and prepare without it being too much of a stress burden. So for me, really the biggest reasons to not take the SAT or ACT would be severe test anxiety and struggle with standardized testing, or applying to only UCs or only test blind, right? If you're applying to test optional universities, I really encourage you to take it because it will be additive, right? So once you decide to test, then you get a score back and you're going to have to think about, do I want to submit my score, right? So that's a nice thing. When you're first deciding to take it, you're not deciding to submit the score. You're just deciding to take it. Yeah. And so that's a really important one. All right. So let's say you studied really hard. You took the test more than once, but you still feel like, man, this is just not the score that reflects my abilities. Then don't submit your score, especially if your GPA is higher. So that's the other part, right? The second part there, if your GPA is in the top 50% of GPAs of admitted students, you may not want to submit your score if you feel like your score is lower than that. So it's really important to look at the most recent admission statistics. And you can find that for any university. You can email them and ask them for it, or you just Google the name of the university and student profile or freshman profile. Then you will see the most recent and updated applicant statistics, so that you can see, how do I compare? How does my GPA compare? And how does my test score compare? So if your GPA is in the bottom 50% of admitted students, but your SAT or ACT score is in a higher percentile, that's great. Submit that score. You're then showing, hey, I can do this. I struggled a little bit here or there. I also went to high school during the pandemic. There were a lot of changes, a lot of shifts. You guys had to get used to online classes. The stress that everyone has gone through has taken a toll on GPAs. So that's okay, right? And you can show through your test score, for example, that you are with it, you're on it, and you're excited to go to college. If you have some red flags like C's or D's on your transcript, so for example, in math, then working really hard on your math score for the SAT or ACT can really show that college, like, hey, I acknowledge I have this weakness, and it is a struggle, a challenge that I've been facing, but I'm not letting that challenge knock me down. I am going to bite my way through it. I'm going to claw my way through it, and I'm going to give you a decent math score on the standardized test. So again, it's something that's still in your control, right? You can't control what you did last year or the year before or the year before. You can't go back and change your cumulative GPA, but you can still change this test score. So it's really kind of empowering in a way. And if you don't like your score, you don't submit it, right? Again, it's not like you have to. Let's say you had a very non-traditional pathway. So maybe a Waldorf education, Montessori education, maybe you were homeschooled, right? Maybe you had a prolonged leave of absence for medical reason, anything like that. Then you may want to take this test to really show that you're capable of doing well. And actually, if you're homeschooled, you have to take the test. That is, even at test optional schools, the test will still be required for most homeschooled students. So keep that in mind as well if any of you are homeschooled. And let's say you want to be considered for really selective programs, and let's say that you want to really up your opportunity for scholarship money, free money, I like to call it. You may really want to work hard on your score, get it up there, because then your overall application is elevated. Even if the school is test optional and it doesn't affect directly which scholarship you get, if your overall application is elevated, then it can still have an effect on the scholarships that you can get. So there's a lot of opportunity in taking the test, doing well, and then submitting your score. All right, this is what I just said, but I'm going to say it one more time. Even if a test optional university states that you will be eligible for scholarships and financial aid without submitting an SAT or ACT score, then you can still, though, get more money if you submit a very high score. And the reason I know this is because I talk to college admissions reps all the time. And just in June, our whole team attended the Independent Educational Consulting Association conference, which is a bunch of college counselors getting together with college admissions reps and learning about the landscape, right? This happens twice a year, and that's how we all stay on top of everything. And I was talking to several different college reps, and I asked them this question, and they said, no, I mean, we won't not consider you for a scholarship if we say that. And then I said, but what if, this student overall, you may have had some reservations about their GPA, but then they show you really high test score. So you can really see they're applying themselves and they're trying really hard, and they've, put a lot of effort into that. Then could that lead to a higher scholarship? And even that admissions rep said, yeah, actually, in that case, it could, right? So I just really want you guys to know that. For me, I ended up graduating debt-free from college, and it was the most wonderful thing ever. So do everything and anything you can to get higher merit scholarships, right? As long as you are still having balance in your life and as long as you are not sacrificing your mental health. I think that's really important as well. So let's talk a little bit about a growth mindset. We all have a lot of negative self-talk, right? So how can we turn that into motivation? And this is going to be a really brief slide, but I just really wanted to mention it. I think it's so important, especially if you decide that you're going to take one of these tests. So really learn to view a mistake or as a challenge, not as a failure. Yeah. Oh, I got this wrong. That's okay. I'm going to learn how to do it better. So mistakes and challenges are real opportunities rather than failures. If you say, I don't understand this, go and rephrase that to, I want to learn more. Instead of saying, I'm stupid, I'm a failure, say, I get to try again. I'm going to do better next time. So instead of saying I'm bad at this, I'm going to improve in my areas of opportunity. I really want you guys to Google this a little bit. Yeah, the growth mindset. It's so powerful. And that's why I really kind of wanted to show you guys this just real quick, just to plant the seed if you do decide to go for these tests. So if you decide that you're going to go for these tests, and I know that we have several rising seniors, we have some juniors and some sophomores, and I'm going to talk really specifically through this timeline. So this is the timeline that we recommend for rising seniors. There's a lot of information on this. Again, this is part of our SAT, ACT survival guide that we're going to email out to you. So what I usually recommend is taking the diagnostic test now, so June, July, so you can scooch this over just a little bit. So we'd be here right now, right, in July. So you may want to take your test in September or October, your real test, or if you have a lot of time to study, you may want to take it in August or September, right? You can see that not all tests, not all SATs and ACTs are offered in all months. So that has to kind of factor into your timeline. I really recommend taking practice tests as you are preparing. Khan Academy has wonderful free practice tests for the SAT. And then the ACT website also has free practice tests on there. And if you Google it, you can find a lot more from crackact.com.org as well. But like I said, we have a bunch of practice tests. So, just shoot us an email at info@strive2learn, and we can get those to you as well. Now, what I really would do is take that diagnostic test with the library that's happening next week. So, okay. I hope this makes sense. I don't want to spend too much time on it. I guess the biggest thing I'm going to say is if you are deciding to apply early action or early decision to college, that's right here. That's happening here. Right? So like November 1st is oftentimes an early action deadline. So you have to have taken it if you want to apply with your score by the October test date. So you can still take the October test dates for your November applications, but check with each college. If you're applying regular decision, then the December test date is the last test date that you can take. Check for each college. Not all colleges are the same, but in a nutshell, that's really the timeline that you're looking at. So I recommend trying to take it twice. If you haven't already taken it and you're a rising senior, you could still take it twice without stressing yourself out too much. Sometimes the score just pops up a couple points the second time you take it because it's not the first time that you're sitting in that testing environment. So that's definitely something that I would recommend. This timeline and making it specific to who you are as a student, that's something that we go over with you. Actually, William is the one who'd be going over that with you, who's here supporting me. When we kind of explain your score report and help you choose which test is the best one so that then you can go and prepare for it. Okay, we also have a sample timeline for rising juniors, and we do have a couple juniors in here today. So juniors say a lot, oh, but I feel like I haven't done enough math. But you guys saw that, right? You saw that there was no pre-calculus and there was no calculus on those tests at all. There's a little bit of trigonometry, right? And some algebra 2, but mainly it was pre-algebra, algebra 1, and geometry. That is the bulk, over 80% of the math. So I just really want you guys to know that because we really recommend trying to take these tests in the first half of junior year. So prepping through the summer and then taking your first one. Again, this is the low stress timeline. Yeah, that's the important part. Taking your first one somewhere around here. Here's the real test, right? September or October. That way your school year hasn't gone crazy yet. Junior year is usually the most intense school year of them all. You might be taking some APs for the first time or just upping the level of rigor, and more is expected of you, right? So try not to say, oh, I'm going to take my first one in February or March. You're going to get really stressed out. Can you? Yeah, you can. Of course. We had a timeline for rising seniors as well. But if you really want to choose a low stress timeline, just know you already know enough math to do very well on these tests. So you can take, start preparing now, take a couple practice tests throughout the summer, and take your first real test in September, October. Once you get that back, you can decide, okay, do I want to take it again? Do I want to try again? And then you could take it again in November or December, and then you're done. So we have so many juniors who are just done before Christmas. And that way, the second half of junior year, they can focus on studying for their APs. They can start visiting colleges. They can start building their college list. And they're much less stressed because they're not trying to do all of that at the same time as their standardized tests. So again, this is a myth. Just really want to make that clear. Okay, so we have 2 practice ACTs coming up. A practice ACT and a practice SAT. William, could you find the registration link for me and add that to the chat? That would be really wonderful. Or Danielle, even if you could pop it in the chat, that would be super, super helpful. I don't have it on this slide. So I just want to make sure that, we have that in here. Now, as far as, let me just adjust something here. One quick moment. Okay, so. Nope, not what I meant to do. I'm clicking on the wrong thing. Here we go. My video is in front of the right thing. Okay, here we go. So staying in the know, really understanding, what are we, like, what am I supposed to do? What are the changes that are still happening, right? Things are not done changing yet. I recommend subscribing to our newsletter. You can go on strivetoloearn.com and sign up there, or just click on this link in the slides that we'll be sending out. We also have a blog where we try to put updated things all the time. And we just launched our podcast yesterday. So our very first podcast episode, our podcast is called Mindful Admissions overall. And our first episode talks about how can you be mindful in your pathway to college, right? And that's what I was talking about a lot today. What is balance? What is mental health? What is stress? How can you decrease that stress, even though there's all this new stuff that you have to learn about and then make decisions about, right? So really recommend you guys taking a look at the podcast. Episode 3 or 4 is going to be more stuff, myth busting, basically, about the SAT and ACT. So there's a lot of different topics that we look at from, being mindful and the way that you are working towards your future as a young adult, and actual things like, how do I fill out the FAFSA? What is it even? What is an early application deadline, and what should I do about it, right? We also have a YouTube channel, Instagram, Facebook, LinkedIn, all that. So let me just go on to the ACT practice test, William just put this in the chat, is on June 30th. Sorry, June? It shouldn't be on June, William. I think that was the wrong one. It's July. Okay, he's gonna update that real quick, but it is on the same website that you were able to register for this today. So let's get to our Q&A. I have a question here, and I want to read it out loud, and please put any questions you might have in the Q&A. Thank you so much, Danielle. So we have the SAT on the 28th, so in 4 days on Wednesday, and then the ACT on the 31st. So you can sign up for those right there. And that way you can take a diagnostic test of each. Like I said, if those dates don't work for you, it's in the morning on those 2 dates, then please feel free to sign up for a diagnostic proctored test on our website. You can also just sign up on our website to get the test and just self-time. You know, you can do your own thing. It doesn't have to be proctored. I would say it's a little more representative proctored, because that way you really are together with you know, other students in a Zoom, and it's much more like the real test day, but you can do it on your own time as well. It is also very effective. So just reach out to us if you need a practice test to get started with your self-studying. Okay, so let me scroll back up to the question we had, and please feel free to send in more questions right now. So we had a question here. If your child is going to a community college and then plans to transfer to a four-year college, will they need to take the SAT? That is a great question. And then there are two more questions in the same question. I'm going to answer this one first. Okay, so if you want to avoid having to take these tests, transferring is a great pathway. Most of the time, they will not need to take the SAT or ACT if they are going to transfer to a four-year college as a junior, which means that they would have 60 units. Yeah. So if they're going to do 60 units, which is usually 2 years at a community college, and then they transfer in as a junior to a four-year, they will not need a standardized test. At most institutions, there are a few highly selective universities that may still require it. So check on the universities that you might be applying to. Now, I myself transferred. I did not have to take it again to transfer as a junior into a four-year. But, and here I come to the second part of the question, Dorothy also asked, will the scores be considered for scholarships? And here's kind of my personal story to that. I got a scholarship that was only half of what I needed. I knew I needed twice that. So I got a $10,000 scholarship. I knew I needed closer to 25, honestly, for the university I was looking at to be able to afford to go there. I asked them, well, is there anything I could do? And they said, why don't you take the SAT again and get a 650 on the math? So I was like, yes, I can do it. And I studied and I studied and I studied. And again, it's very unusual for a transfer student to even have to show this, but it was for a merit scholarship. They said, we can give you this merit scholarship, these additional $15,000 a year if you get the 650 on the math. And I took the test and I got a 640 on the math. So I did not get that scholarship and I did not attend that institution, which in the end was a great thing for me because I attended a different institution with a higher scholarship. But that can happen. So yes, Dorothy, the scores can be considered for scholarships as a transfer student. It's not always like that. A lot of our transfer students, we help with kind of the transfer counseling. So we help them build a good fit college list and make sure they're doing all of their academics in the correct order so that they can have a really successful transfer experience and transfer application. And we go through with every single student and we check with each institution, hey, I know you say you don't require, nor will you look at the SAT score for admissions, but will it increase my chances as a student to get a higher merit scholarship? So definitely something to ask the universities. It was the case for me, and it has been the case for other students, but the majority of transfer students really never needed to worry about it. So it really depends where you're applying and who you are as a student. Okay, then we have another question here. Can students take the test as a community college student? So Dorothy, the great thing is you can take the test anytime you want. I actually took the test just not too long ago, a couple of years back, because I want to make sure as a test prep tutor that I am on the top of my game. And I'm happy to say that now I would have gotten that scholarship. Now I do score in the upper 700s on the math or 800. But it took me a while to get there. But that's why it's so fun for me to tutor all this because, really helping those students through that struggle, me having been someone who went from a 50th percentile to a 99th percentile. So yes, you can take it. Even you could take it as a mom, as a dad, as any type of parent. You can go and you can take the test if you really want to. You'll get a few odd looks and you'll feel very weird being surrounded by a lot of 16-year-olds and 17-year-olds, but it's totally possible. Anyone can take it at any time. Okay, do we have any more questions? Awesome, great. I'm so happy that was helpful. Thank you, Dorothy. All right, if we do have more questions, feel free to write them in. Like I said, I really, really recommend signing up for our newsletter, checking out our blog, and the podcast is just a fun and informative way to stay on top of everything. And we're actually going to do some transfer things as well. Dorothy, if you want to know more about transfer students, we just launched a series of blog posts about that and are creating, I think we just finished creating kind of a transfer student guide to transferring, which is one of just our free resources. So send us an email. William, maybe pop our email in there, please, for everyone. Shoot info@strive2learn.com. Just send us an email if you have any more questions. And like I said, we also offer a free consultation just to sit down and continue this kind of conversation with any of our advisors. So let me know if you need anything. Okay, so yes, I can definitely take a question about AP scores and timing. I can do that. I got a question if I can answer a question about that. So go ahead, go right ahead, me, and pop in your question. What is the question about submitting the AP scores and timing? Do you need to send your scores before you know the grade? So let me see if I'm understanding the question correctly. So I think this question is about submitting AP scores and the timing. The question is whether you need to send scores before you know the grade. So basically AP scores, that's not something that's needed to apply to college. So it's just something that you send in once you've received the grade. You can send in your score report from the College Board. You have them sent, your AP scores, you have them sent directly to the institution that you're going to be attending. And you probably, as a senior, you won't know that until your scores until after you've graduated. And as soon as you have them, you send them in. The AP scores themselves don't really change your admission. They just mean that maybe you'll get college credit. Usually with a 4 or a 5 in most subjects, you will get college credit. Sometimes with a 3, it really depends on each university. So you just send them in as soon as you have them, but you don't need to send in the ones that wouldn't give you college credit. It's kind of like, why send them? You've already been admitted, right? The only reason to send them in would be to get that college credit and get that score or that general education requirement waived. I hope that answered the question. Okay, anything else? Well, okay, good. All right, so thank you guys so much for sticking with me. I just want to sincerely apologize again for having all of these technical difficulties. I'm glad we all made it. Thank you so much for your participation and for your questions. Please let me know if there's anything you guys need. And I really, really encourage you, if you're a student, to sign up for both diagnostic tests so that you can save yourself time studying by having taken both and then really knowing which one is the right fit for you. I think that is so important when it comes to really, preparing for these. So really just make sure that you're really on top of that. Okay. Well, thank you guys so much. I really appreciated all of your questions and participation. So I'll see you soon, and let me know if you need anything else. Thank you so much. Bye. Thank you. Thank you so much.